Pucks with Haggs is brought to you by Prizepicks.
Welcome to another edition of the Pucks with Haggs podcast, powered by Prizepicks, the exclusive daily fantasy partner of the CLNS Media Network. I believe this is the 167th episode of the Pucks with Haggs podcast, so thank you, as always, for joining in and listening. Today I have with me longtime friend and colleague Mick Colageo. We will also have Steve Conroy from the Boston Herald dropping in a few minutes. But first and foremost, Mick, how's it going, my friend?
I'm having steam Conroy right here with I brought my tea up to sip and it was too hot and it fogged up my glasses. It's not because I'm crying about last night.
No, nothing like a nice warm tea in the morning to get you settled when you're going to talk some hockey, Mick. That's good stuff.
After last night, I was going to start with scotch. No, I don't drink the hard stuff.
I'm sure all the Bruins, some of the Bruins did after that game was over. All right, let's give a quick little bit of love to our sponsor, Prizepicks. Download the Prizepicks app today and use the code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on Prizepicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prizepicks, run your game. All right, Mick, let's get into this. I don't think I've talked to you since they played the two games coming out of the Four Nations face-off break. Kind of similar feelings after both. It's and I said this to a couple of people last night after that game was over. It's kind of Groundhog Day with this team. It's been a lot of the same stuff over and over again with similar results, and what's amazing to me is that, and let's set this up. They come out of the break against the Ducks. They get a point. Against the Ducks, you would certainly hope to get more than 1 point. You need 2 points at this point in the season. They came out really flat in the first period in that game. Just didn't look like they were ready to go, which is not great. And then so the next time they play is Tuesday night, last night against the Toronto Maple Leafs. In between those two games, Don Sweeney sat with the media and basically punted on the season and said, they're probably going to be trading some players, was talking about the season in the past tense, like it's basically already over and they've made their analysis on this group, was essentially saying that most of the free agent, pretty much all the unrestricted free agents that they have, save for Brad Marchand, are probably not coming back. It was really interesting that at this point in the year, and it just struck me as very different for Don Sweeney to say a lot of these things in that kind of a press conference around the trade deadline, or press meeting around the deadline, where he's basically like saying that this team doesn't have the right stuff and they're going to start thinking long-term in the long-term. Yeah, exactly. Long-term future of this franchise. Waving the white flag rather than, throwing out good draft picks or good assets to try to futilely get into the playoffs for something that's going to be over really quick anyway, even if they get there. And then so on the basis of all of that, the management basically saying they're not going to be trading for players, not going to be bringing back the free agents. I would have expected that team and those players to have a little FU in their game last night to show management, hey, we're better than you think we are. We're pissed that you kind of talked about us this way. And they sort of played like that at the beginning, and it was a big game against Toronto, but it was the same thing where they just took their foot off the gas pedal, couldn't maintain the pace that they were at early in the game, and just really faded as the game was going on. And this is going to happen when you're missing McAvoy and Lindholm, right? I thought they played pretty well considering they were missing their top two defensemen, and that's a big part of why I think Don Sweeney is kind of waving the white flag here, is because of those injuries. But I would have expected them to at least follow through in that game last night, and the fact they didn't, they give up a goal in the last minute of the game, and then they lose in overtime. It just feels like, Mick, we've seen enough to see that this team is what they are, and the Bruins are making the right move here, doing what they're going to do going into the deadline.
If this team, to Don Sweeney's point on Sunday, if this team isn't what they are, then this season is what it is. And maybe he's speaking more about the season than his feeling about this group of players. And there's just been too many things that have happened that have befallen them in order to realistically think that this season can be repaired. And we welcome Steve Conroy at this point.
Hey, Steve.
Here he
Hey,
comes.
what's happening?
Keep going,
Boston
Mick.
Herald fame.
You got me?
Good morning, Steve.
I got you, Steve. We were just talking about just getting into it about what we saw last night. The Don Sweeney presser on Sunday, the game against the Ducks, and kind of I was saying to a few people last night, it feels like Groundhog Day at this point. It feels like we're seeing the same thing kind of playing out over and over again with this team. And, you know, the way things ended last night, it really speaks to exactly what Don Sweeney was saying on Sunday, kind of speaking of this team in the past tense, like basically the season's already over. And that they're just not going to be able to get over the hump and get in the playoffs. And even if they did, it would be a very futile thing to be spending assets to try to bring in players. And, you know, I think they're doing the right thing here, clearing the decks of some of the guys that are going to be UFA, potentially trading some of them away and getting assets back in return. And not, you know, and sort of building for the future and kind of at this point admitting what everybody else can see is that they just don't have it this year.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I joined midstream here, but yeah, it's, you know, they've lost 4 in a row now, all 4 winnable games, but they make the critical mistake at the wrong time. You know, last night they're up 3-1. They're on the power play. Oliver Wahlstrom takes a high sticking penalty in the offensive zone. Bing, bang, boom. It's 3-2. Next thing you know, they're on their heels. Pasternak makes a Pasternak play, gives them the lead again, and they can't hold on to it. Yeah, Zadorov gets his pocket picked by Robertson. Bang, bang, boom. Going to overtime, and you know, overtime is a crapshoot. They make the mistakes, the critical mistakes at the critical time, and you know, it's partially, you know, it's not everybody's, you know, it's not some of these players' fault. Mason Lohrei, he's playing up in the lineup right now where he's going to get exposed for some of the things that, you know, a young offensive defenseman is going to make. And they're forcing him to make them at critical times. And, you know, even Nikita Zadorov, nobody thought he was going to be, even though he got a decent contract, nobody thought he was going to be the guy, which, you know, by default he is right now, as far as being a shutdown defenseman, and it's just not working.
Yeah, no, it all speaks to the reality, and I mentioned this to Mick, and you didn't miss much, Steve. We had just started right before you jumped on. It speaks to the reality of, like, part of the reason Don Sweeney said what he said on Sunday was because McAvoy and Lindholm basically are out, and you're not going to be able to win these must-win games and go on a run when you're missing those 2 guys and you're pushing all these other players up into spots where they're not going to necessarily always excel or succeed. And like the one concern I have about Lohrei is I do not want him to lose his swagger and confidence of trying to make things happen offensively and trying to be creative and, you know, trying to do his thing. He's got to figure out how to do that while managing the game and picking his spots to do it and all those things that come with experience and figuring that stuff out. But he took it pretty hard, I felt like, after that game last night. And to full credit to him, super accountable and answering all the questions, and he was there to talk about it, and I give him a lot of credit for that. That's great for a young player, and that's frankly a show of leadership to do that and to be there to answer the bell and talk afterwards about what happened. But you could see he was kind of taking it hard, and it's going to be a little bit of a tough time for him because they're going to ask him to do a ton. And, you know, to your point, Steve, late in the game, like, and we've seen this a few times from the Bruins. We saw this a few games ago where they got a break on a goalie interference call, and then they come down and give up another goal right away after that. And you saw, like, the fate was sealed, that it was going to happen sooner or later. In that last night, before Toronto scored, Pavel Zacha has all the time in the world and is really not under pressure to clear the puck, and instead he gets it intercepted by Austin Matthews, and Austin Matthews fires one off the post that could have very easily gone in about like 30 seconds before
went out the
that
inside
goal actually
side.
got scored by Toronto. So, like, they were in scramble mode the whole time. They looked awful in the last 90 seconds, 2 minutes of that game. They looked like they were panicking when they had the puck instead of making good, smart plays with the net empty on the other side. You could see that whole thing coming just by the way that they were playing towards the end of the game. So it wasn't even just the defensemen. It was other players, too, that were making critical mistakes. And it's been like that all year, to your point. What do you think, Mick, about just that? I thought it was interesting that Sweeney said was very sort of frank and candid about the UFAs and basically saying he didn't think anybody was going to be back besides Marchand, and saying that during the season, saying that now ahead of the deadline. I mean, that obviously I think means that Trent Frederick is going to get moved. I would expect Justin Brazeau is going to get moved. He was a healthy scratch last night. I wonder if that has any connection to them not wanting him to get hurt before they deal him, in addition to the speed thing against Toronto. But your thoughts just on Sweeney being that upfront about the free agents and players not coming back. Usually don't see that during the season, where he's basically telling Cole Koepke, Justin Brazeau, Trent Frederick, Riley Tufte, all those guys that you're probably not coming back next year.
It didn't work. And to me, the Bruins buttressed his comments. Let's face it, Toronto came out flat as a pancake. And for the first half of the game, if not two periods, they were mailing it in. And the Bruins had beaucoup opportunities to get a fourth goal. And at a certain point, the Leafs realized that the Bruins were Tommy Morrison, and the punches don't hurt anymore. And if I can punch this guy in the nose just once, he's going to be out on his feet, and I'm going to win this thing. And I feel like that's what happened last night. When they didn't get that fourth goal about three times, and then when Toronto stuck one in, I tweeted, and I was only partway kidding, that the fans have left the building. Fans are now leaving the building. And the 3-1 near the end of the second. But that's them, and I feel like that's what Don Sweeney knows about this team. And that's why I'm wearing my golf hat this morning, because this team has no resiliency. You talk about bend but don't break, and they break. They've broken a record number of times for a Bruins team of the 21st century. I mean, it's incredible how many times this team is bent and then snapped. And it's usually on the road. Last night it was at home, and it was so predictable. Toronto finally decided, hey guys, let's just play this damn hockey game and see if we can win. And it was like the 72 Bruins against the Oakland Seals when they were down 5-1, and they came back and won 8-6. 6-1, won 8-6. They just had that ability. The Bruins are that much compromised, that much has gone wrong. Confidence erodes, they're that fragile. And I think that Don Sweeney is just being real. This is this season. They'll sit down and decide player by player what they think about the whole roster and whether they were wrong about what they felt, or if it was just a perfect storm to begin the season, set them on a bad course, and that they're really better than this and they should give it another year without tearing it down. That's going to be their in-house debate. But they know what this season is, and this isn't coming anywhere. There's nothing there that tells them that this is going to. I even feel bad for Pavel Zacha, because he's been the most consistent forward they've had this year. And last night he was looking like everybody else. So he's starting to break down.
Yeah, no, it's the sign of a bad team when you plug up one leak and all of a sudden another leak pops up. And it's like that all year, where you're basically trying to plug all these leaks that it's just eventually going to overwhelm you. And I think we've seen that with the Bruins team. At points. And your point about resiliency is absolutely correct. Like, they've shown some resiliency, like have a bad game, able to circle the wagons and rally and have a better effort the next time out. Like, they've done that some. The in-game resiliency is just not there. Absolutely 100%. Like, when things start to go against them, they just do not have the ability to withstand it and come out on the other side. And they've consistently shown that all year. Steve, your thoughts on Sweeney's presser on Sunday, which was very unlike what we've seen from him in his time here. And obviously this is a season unlike any in his time here, and sort of what this portends for the trade deadline and the rest of this season.
Yeah, I mean, he knows that fans know what's going on here. he can't, bull crap people and say, oh, we're in this till the end. Sure, he wants to. He'd like to get into the playoffs. Why not?
Right.
But you got to stop peeling off some pieces that you're not going to bring back anyway. Could be an unfortunate happening last night with Trent Frederick getting hurt. Who knows what the deal is there? That could be a second or third round draft pick out the window. And I hope Trent is okay and it's not a major injury for him. But from Bruins perspective, it's not a good deal. You got to assume Justin Brazeau is going as well, and I don't know what you get for him. And beyond that, I'm not sure what you get for anybody. Some of those guys like Koepke and Parker Wotherspoon, you might as well just keep because you need people on the on the roster. It's okay if you let them walk at the end of the season. I would like to see, and I'm not overly excited about the prospects. I would like to see Lysell up here, and I wouldn't mind seeing Merkulov up here. Maybe they don't have it. Maybe they're they're 4A players, but I'd like to see it up here. I'd like to know before we write them off. I think there's plenty of opportunity for them right now. I'm not sure if I'd let Oliver Wahlstrom play anytime soon at this point. That's a terrible penalty, a terrible time to take. And they're planning for next year. I've always been a pro Marchand guy. Keep him. I mean, if somebody's going to give you something crazy, then you have to look at it. But I'd like to keep a little bit of continuity here for the culture and all that because I do believe in that. But it's time to play for next year.
Yeah, it is. And I think Don Sweeney, again, was very candid about that with Marchand, too, basically saying, we've got to get something done in the next couple of weeks here, get on the same page as far as a contract.
You can't let him walk.
No, or they're going to probably entertain offers for him, too, and they should, if they're not going to have common ground. And so it puts the ball in Marchand's court a little bit and in his agent's court to, let's get moving on something and get it done so they have a plan in place going forward. But I was glad to hear, frankly, Don Sweeney say that, it's still his intention for Brad Marchand to be a Bruin for his entire career, given some of the stuff that was swirling around out there. But it has to make sense for everybody, and it has to be, with a contract that I think both sides want and can live with to continue that continuity that I think you're right, Steve. I think they need that. And he showed at the Four Nations that if you put talent around him, he still very much has game and can play. He looked very good in that tournament. He looked right along with that frenetic pace that everybody was playing with at that super elite level. And he was able to play and have success and look good doing it. So, I think that's something that definitely should happen in the next couple of weeks is them figure it out, or at least know, where each other stand and feel good that they're going to find common ground on a contract. It's going to be interesting though. Steve, this is going to be, Mick, this is going to be something different for Bruins fans. This is like the Red Sox in September when they're out of the race and, meaningless baseball games. You see a lot of those towards the end of the year. This could turn into a situation in the last few weeks where we're watching the Bruins sort of going through the motions with these games. And to Steve's point, if that's the case, and if all these UFAs aren't coming back and you've already made determinations on them, why in the world wouldn't you bring up guys like Lysell, Merkulov, maybe Farinacci, like a bunch of those guys down in Providence that you at least want to get a few games, see what they can do at the NHL level, and make determinations on those young players that you've already seemingly made on these veteran players.
Farinacci is the one who's come on of late.
Yep.
I think internally that they've decided that Merkulov is not an NHL player. He's a great AHL player, but he's small, and from point A to point B, he's not that fast. And
that's Koklachev. That was the same thing.
If you're both of those things,
yep.
And Merkulov has a great work ethic. He's a team guy. He wants to get better. He's extremely intense. I bet it breaks their heart that they can't get him a little faster, because if he was able to get over a fine line speed-wise, then I think he could be a very effective NHL player. As it is, he could probably help a team's second unit power play, but at 5-on-5, you can't match him up. So he's not big enough, strong enough, and he's not fast enough from zone to zone. So Farinacci is the one who's gotten hot in the second half here. The Lysell question goes back to the fact that he still doesn't do the foundational professional things on a consistent basis that can keep him from losing you a game. And as a winger, it's a lot harder to lose a team a game than it is as a defenseman. You can ask Mason Lowry. I'm not sure Nikita Zadorov is cognizant of this, the way he plays this far into his career. But Koepke, I thought, was one of his better games last night. He played with a lot of energy, a lot of spunk in the first half of that game. Had the whole game not gone south, he was one of the guys I would have wanted to talk to last night. And so it's time. Yeah, sure, it's time. But there's not a long list of guys that they want to look at.
No.
I also wonder too if there's a market here for Korpisalo, even though I think it's a 2-year deal. You got like
2 more years left,
and
after that, yeah.
So, but at the money that we're talking, it's probably something that teams could fit in and would love to get some goaltending support. And for a team that's making moves like the Ducks just the Gibson talk, and they just acquired a goalie. Now maybe it's time the Bruins will listen on him too, just because in the off season you can reinvent your goaltending. So yeah, they're there. They're there. It's time for them to start looking at this from a GM standpoint, and less of a let's try to figure out how to win on the ice thing. And maybe it's just going to be about opportunity the rest of the way. I agree with you on Lowry, Joe. I just feel like he really showed last night that he wasn't going to wilt. He was going to keep playing his game, keep playing hard, keep doing what he does, however many mistakes that necessarily come with that. I'm troubled by the fact that the Bruins came out of the Four Nations needing absolutely to win and just pretty much just let the horse run free. And because at his career stage, that's not a winning formula, especially not without being buttressed by the guys that they're missing. There's no way that was going to work.
No, the hope you have with a player that talented is they don't become at all gun shy or lose some of that swagger that they have, right, and that ability to bounce back from the mistakes or a tough game or a tough bounce in overtime or a bad decision in a split second, like the things that happen when you're a defenseman.
Now they don't have to serve the playoff master. Now they can just let him go. Now do it. Now play him. Now this is what we've seen from Lowry in the last week is what we should see from Lowry in the next several, because it now won't be punitive.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, it's not the win now sort of mentality. They can be a little more patient with the mistakes, especially, given their mindset going into the trade deadline. All right, let's take a break from the podcast action to give a little love to Prizepicks. Prizepicks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America and the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Join over 10 million users and get started today. Instead of battling thousands of other players that could be pros or sharks, you simply pick more or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you watch the winnings roll right in. It's fun, and it's super simple. Prizepicks also offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, Prizepicks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value for your lineups. Make your holidays bigger and brighter with Prizepicks, the best place to get real money action while watching your favorite sports. Here are some picks for this week. Nathan McKinnon, more than 3.5 shots on goal. Brady Tkachuk, more than 3.5 hits. And Cale Makar, more than 25.5 ice time on ice. You can now win up to 1,000 times your money on Prizepicks. Prizepicks now offers MasterCard as well for quick and easy deposits into your account this sports season. Download the Prizepicks app today and use the code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on Prizepicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prizepicks, run your game. Let's get back into it. We have a question here from Roger Perry, a great listener here that sends us some pretty thoughtful, good questions. He sent this one in. Do you think either Chris Kelly or Jay Leach would be a good choice to elevate to head coach next year? Lastly, what about Joel Quenneville or another experienced head coach to fill Boston's top job for next year? I'm curious if you think NHL head coaches make much of an impact on their team's success. Thank you. Love the podcast. Roger Perry. Steve, obviously he's not really mentioning Joe Sacco here. I don't think Joe Sacco is going to be a guy that is going to be the head coach of this team next year. I think he's done a really good job as the interim coach and been put into a tough situation. He certainly got them to respond when he first took over. But I think, given what we've seen lately, I have a hard time believing he's going to be named the head coach. And Don Sweeney mentioned in the presser that, they're going to make that decision in the offseason. If it's up to you, do you go with somebody that's an assistant that's already here? Do you go with a college coach that they've, kind of shown a willingness or a want to do at times that's kind of unproven in the NHL? Do you go for a guy like Joel Quenneville that can come in and maybe, if you bring a couple of veteran pieces in, try to compete next year and sort of put it all back together again? Which direction do you think, Steve, makes the most sense if you're looking for a head coach to bring in?
Well, I mean, Quenneville would be great without the baggage, but there's baggage there. And they were, I think they're still spooked about what happened with the Mitchell Miller situation. Yep. And I'd be surprised if they went that route again. It might be time for where the Bruins are at in their cycle to go with a guy like Jay Leach. Let him grow with some of these young players. Kelly, I think, could be a good head coach at some point. I think as a former NHL player, there's always, that instant credibility. But I think, this is the right time to go with the young guy, whether it be Jay Leach or a Nate Lehman if he wants to make the jump, or anyone like that, or the guy from Denver, Hale.
Yep.
Any one of those guys. I'd love to see them keep Joe Sacco in the fold somehow, because he's been a very good assistant, and he's done the best he can. This is kind of a crap sandwich he's been handed for a second chance at a head coaching gig. Here's your team. You're going to be missing your top two defensemen for your stretch run, and they were already a thin team. So that's a tough break for Joe, big time. But I think it's probably a time for them to go with a young guy like as Washington did with Spencer Carberry. Maybe Jay Leach is that guy. I'd be interested to see how well he would do with that opportunity. He's got head coaching experience and down in Providence, so this may be his opportunity to get a shot.
Yeah, and to your point, Steve, I think it makes sense to keep Joe Sacco around as a veteran guy and a guy that, has institutional knowledge here and has done really well and has been, frankly, a good employee doing what he's done over this year, taking this team, like you mentioned, to be kind of the veteran guy with a younger guy that maybe the head coach is the first time. I think that's a good spot for him. And I would hope as well that he is sticking around after this, and this wouldn't be like the end. Just because they didn't make the playoffs this year with him as the interim head coach. I think Jay Leach would be an interesting choice. I think it is definitely his time if he's going to be a head coach. He's been an assistant for a while after being a head guy in Providence. Seems to have a good rapport with a lot of the Bruins players. So I think it would be time for a guy like that if you went with somebody inside the organization. I just wonder, too, if they decide it's time to go outside the organization and bring somebody else in from outside. Carl, as you mentioned.
Carl, I'm sorry. The name was slipping my mind.
That's all right. But, I mean, he's like the hot coaching prospect after the
and he might want 5 years in that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't do 5 years with anybody, with any coach.
No, I wouldn't either. And he may just avoid Boston altogether because I know he was tight with Jim Montgomery and maybe, he's not going to get the best recommendation from Montgomery about Boston. Who knows what's going to happen there? But Mick, your thoughts on the head coaching picture with the Bruins?
I'm going to sound a little biased here, but to me, I'm waiting to see what happens in New York.
With Laviolette?
I think it's something they got to consider. Yeah. This is what Steve just alluded to. It depends on where the Bruins management decides that the roster is at in its cycle.
Yep.
If you're going outside, then he makes the most sense to me. Obviously, Mike Sullivan would as well, if somehow it's his time in Pittsburgh. That if him coming back to Boston after all these years, this would be his time 20 years later, to coach the Bruins. Laviolette have passed on 3 times. Wouldn't it be ironic if this is how he got that gig? I do feel like they were grooming Jay Leach in Providence. He was there. He was Sweeney's guy. He was his farm project, and they lost him for a bit. They brought him back to the organization. I was frankly surprised this wasn't his team when they fired Montgomery. Yeah, I understand what they did and why they did it, and I totally agree with Joe Sacco when he said we have to get our defensive game in order. We have to shut down teams. We have to try. This is how we have to play. And I do believe we have the offense in this room to score enough goals to win, but we have to nail down the door here. And that's what he set out to do. They had a little surge, and then they struggled. At that time, I thought it would have been a perfect time to go get a winger with a Tyler Toffoli type skill set, so that even if a handful of these many one-goal games that they wound up only getting a point or no points out of, if they had just gotten 2 out of 5 of those games because of a timely goal, then this might be a different conversation. But that acquisition was not made. And then this team got tired, and they pressed, and they began to revert very slowly and incrementally back to the team that Montgomery coached, and with a lot more leaks and problems and vulnerabilities and lack of resiliency. And I don't even think that's mental. That's just hockey. That's what they are. So yeah, if they're going to grow the team young, like you suggested, Joe and Steve, if this is the way they're going to go, then to me, they brought back Jay Leach for this reason, to resume where they had him before and go forward. I guess they didn't want to introduce him to a crisis project, is what they decided. But I don't have any doubt that when they brought back Jay Leach, it was to someday be the head coach of the Bruins. So where are we at with the roster? Fresh start next year. If they decide to get young and to say, hey, look, Marchand, we want to sign him. We want him to be here to lead, but he's going to be playing out the string. We're probably not going to be a contender during his time here if we're going to try to just reset, retool, and might involve a little bit of a step back.
Yeah, and I'm sure that's part of the conversation that's going to happen between Marchand and Sweeney as agent over the next couple of weeks when they're talking about contract.
But if at the long table, Cam Neely and Charlie Jacobs, and we're like, no, we want to win. We want to win next year. We still believe that we had a good team, but everything went wrong for us. We still believe this team did good things, and that we, not this year, but in the offseason to prepare themselves to take another step. It just didn't work out. Let's take another shot at this. We still believe in the roster. If that's the tack they're going, then to me, if I'm them, I'm watching to see what happens with Mike Sullivan and Peter Laviolette.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And that's, I think, a very believable, realistic conversation just based on, how many things went wrong even before the season even started for this particular group this year. And that there's going to be a ton of salary cap space over the next 3 years to continue to add to the roster that they have and improve it and bring in other players if they can identify ones that are going to really help. And certainly it's going to have to be better decisions than Elias Lindholm and Zadorov have been this year. And, I will say Lindholm, I think, has been pretty good in the 2 games since the Four Nations. He's played better. I thought last night was one of his better games.
I agree.
So maybe there's something there. I
think we get a better Lindholm next season.
That was something.
I think I agree. I think when that line's role became clearly defined as being the shutdown line, I think he started to play a lot better, at least defensively. Offensively, he's still, he
passed up a shot last night.
Yeah, he's still a hair behind in handling the puck. He's not great at right now. That seems to be a mental thing with him. But yeah, I agree that he's played better defensively. He's sunk his teeth into this role. And hopefully next year there's a better player there that comes out.
Yeah. I mean, I even think last night offensively, I honestly thought he was okay. I thought he was better than he's been a lot of other times this year. I thought, he still passes up shots, and he's never going to be a guy.
And he shoots the puck well.
Yeah.
He really shoots it hard.
He does. He's just not going to be like a guy that's a big time puck transporter through the neutral zone. Like, he's just clearly not that kind of a center.
No.
Which is okay if you have somebody on the wing that likes to carry the puck. Like, that can be overcome. But like, that's one thing I want to see in these last 23 games is better Elias Lindholm, something he can build on for next year. That's something I'm interested in seeing, in addition to the young players playing well. Steve, anything you'd really like to see as far as this team goes in these last 23 games left to this season? Looking forward to next year.
I'd like to see more out of Patra. I'd like to, he gets an opportunity to play with Pasternak when they come out of a penalty kill. And, that line is the only thing they've got going, with Geeky and Zaka, really, offensively anyway. And so, I understand them not breaking that up. But I'd like to see him be able to maybe play some more spots with some high-end guys. He's an interesting, and I still call him a prospect now because I don't think we know what he is yet. I don't know if he's a third line guy. I don't know if he's got it in him to be a top six guy. So I'm very curious to see how he develops over these next 23 games.
Yeah, he's not a finished NHL product. No.
He'll be a better skater in 5 years.
But I've seen improvement in his skating this year. I've seen improvement in a lot of different areas. I think he's shown the skill level to be able to play with high-end players, really high-end players, and make plays for them and create offense. And same thing with Lowry. Like, put him out there, let him play. Let's see what he can do. Like, put him in different situations. There's less of a pressure now to make the playoffs, and I think that pressure was taken off on Sunday a little bit by Don Sweeney. So let these young guys like Patra and Lowry really play big roles and develop and see what they can do in kind of a little bit of a consequence-free sort of environment if the playoffs aren't really directly overhead. Mick, what would you like to see in these last 23 games as they build to next year?
I'd like to solve my quandaries with Brandon Carlo. I just feel like he had really developed over the last few years prior to last season as a better and better version of himself. And then he sort of last year, some puck yips crept in and they kind of waned later in the year and he was better again. And then this year, I just feel like I look at two guys on this team that I felt like during this shit show of a season that really, it would have been great if they were the best they've ever been. Brandon Carlo is one of those guys, Trent Frederick the other. And I think the Bruins made their decision about Trent Frederick because, obviously the new complications notwithstanding, because he did not rise when the team needed it most and become a guy that they could say, hey, look what we got here. Let's give this guy some money and keep him and build around him and build with him. It didn't happen. He just was kind of like he was going with the boat. And I felt like Carlo's kind of gone with the boat too. I feel like he's had some good games, but I felt like he's had a lot of bad luck. And I just sort of feel like, is he a guy that they can continue looking at as a top three defenseman on their team going forward? Or is this just a rough patch for him that's going to abate, and we'll see the guy that we saw 2-3 years ago who felt like he was coming along in a straight line incline. So, there's foundational aspects to this team that need some solutions or some decisions, resolutions, whatever. What are you going to do now?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And with Carlo and his age and his experience level, he kind of is what he is at this point. And I think you got to make the determination on what you see and what we've seen the last couple of years. And like last night, there was a shift. It was two shifts. It was a shift after shift where the Bruins forwards had it in the zone and they were able to change while keeping the pressure on the Leafs and keeping them scrambling in their own end. And the sequence should have ended up with at least a scoring chance, certainly maybe a goal. They had the Leafs where they wanted them. And then the puck came out to Carlo at the point, and he couldn't handle the pass. And then he fired a puck, like trying to pass it, that was way off target and ended up going out of the zone and going the other way. And it completely killed all the momentum that they had with two bad plays, one after another from him. And we've seen way too much of that from him this year, that it's not his bread and butter to, handle the puck like a silky smooth defenseman and to create offensive plays and all that. But he's got to make at least the rudimentary plays to not kill them momentum wise when they have the puck in the zone. In addition to his penalty killing and all the other stuff that he does. So I think that's a great point about Carlo, that they needed to make a determination. I thought it was interesting that Sweeney talked about not only trading away like maybe free agent rental players at the deadline, but he talked about planting the seeds to maybe make trades at the draft, better their draft position, create more assets, bring more in. And I wonder if veteran players factor into that as well. Guys like Brandon Carlo, Charlie Coyle, others, that they may discuss trading as well if they really want to pare down the roster and build up some assets and really sort of retool with a little more emphasis on change rather than bringing back a lot of the same group. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do with that.
Yeah, they got to decide if last year's team had a bad day or if last year's team is really this year's team. Because without the extraordinary, consistent, reliable goaltending that was so high level last year, maybe we weren't that good after all. They need to sit down and decide, what are we? And once they do that, then the details will work themselves out.
Yeah, no question. Steve, Mick, thank you very much for joining us. Let's thank our sponsor real quick. Download the Prizepicks app today and use the code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on Prizepicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prizepicks, run your game. Steve Conroy, Mick Colageo, thanks for joining us.
Pleasure, guys.
Thank you.
Everybody else out there, thank you for listening. We'll see you at the rink.